Yeah, it's been I've been at home 11 days in 6 weeks.
Wow. Okay. I saw
Yeah,
you in
rough.
Hawaii and then you
Yeah,
were in South Africa.
I was in South Africa 3 times, London twice, and Hawaii once.
Wow. Only once?
Yeah. Although I'll take the Isle of Man's weather over Hawaii's weather any day.
Really? Is it,
100%.
how come? I mean,
I
it's
just
Hawaii.
I don't like being warm.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't
Mm,
like hot. I get hot and sweaty. Heat is a funny thing, right, dude? Like discomfort is what the real ratio is. And I think that
right.
people in hot places are uncomfortable more often than people in cold places. Because in
That
cold
is
places,
true.
you put on a jersey and the houses are built for it. In hot places, you're either in air conditioning
It's
or
true.
you're hot and sweaty. Like I was in Singapore last year and I couldn't stand it. It was just far too hot the whole time.
You're right. The cold is more manageable than, the other extreme of the
Yeah,
heat. I live in Granada in Spain, and in the summer it really kicks off here. So I know
I
exactly
can
what you mean.
imagine.
Yeah, I'm thinking of traveling to the Isle of Man right now, actually.
Not
Um, yeah, man. Well, thank you so much for making the time. Appreciate it, and excited to
at
talk
all.
about a bit about your book. Got some people listening in as well. I've just put a link into the description as well for people to check out your book if that's the best link. Um,
I will have a look.
the one for Tracy McDonald Publishers, if
Yeah,
there's,
yeah, absolutely. It's going to be available on Spotify and Audible and
of course it is.
Amazon later on in the week. In
Nice.
the month. So I give Tracy a head start so we can get nice book sales going in South Africa and then
Yes.
go online and stuff.
Yeah.
I recorded the audiobook about 3 weeks ago.
Okay. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. Awesome. Well, I want to get into all of that, and because um I'm about almost 100 pages in. I would have liked to be a little further on, but I've started. And thanks for advancing me the copy you sent me. I've been reading little bits every morning this week, and yeah, I mean, I love it so far. It's awesome. It's got your trademark kind of funny, kind of punchy style. It's almost, I can't help but kind of read it out aloud sometimes in this kind of half Scottish South African kind of drawl. It just makes it like really more punchy. I love it.
I
Um,
always say to people that's my favorite confidence. My favorite compliment of any of the books is people say it sounds like having a coffee with you. Sounds
yes,
like
it
so
does.
far the one thing nobody's accused me of ever doing is having an AI write my book or a
Good,
ghostwriter. Yeah.
good. Try keep that up as long as you can. But I mean, this is number 40.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There we go.
Which how far?
Yeah, book
Okay,
number
okay, there
four.
we go. Okay, awesome. Book number four.
Yeah, yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, man, fantastic. Well, I mean, it's yeah, it's really cool. I really love how you also kind of it feels like you put a lot of yourself into it, the sense of kind of a personal elements of, it's sort of not just, great advice on leadership and how to do business and, some philosophical reflections in there. I mean, that is almost on every page, but it feels like you've really kind of put yourself into it, which is, I suppose, what makes most great writers do. I'd love to hear from you about how the process of writing it was, because we always only see we have the bias of seeing the final product, which looks like, plain sailing, great, just flies off the page. But maybe the process was difficult or easy. I'd love to hear about what it was like to write this.
Yeah, so I mean, I wrote it using this thing, and every book has a project for me. And so I took this Hemingwright typewriter, and that's what I used to write it. And let me see if I can show you. It's really nice. Comes in this kind of case, and it's
Wow.
got that's like an e-ink screen. It's made by a company called Freewrite, and this was like quite an expensive one. I went with. They've got other ones that you can get. This was their kind of trademark edition. And so
Beautiful.
every book that I write, I have a kind of thing. The way I write it was either where I write it or how short. And this one was I wanted to write it with an old-fashioned typewriter, and so it's kind of cool. So it allows for editing, but it's really difficult. So you can kind of go back and
Yes.
edit, but they've made it that it's possible, but like they don't want you to. So clearly, it's brilliant UX design and that it's terrible UX design. They're
Yes.
saying to you, just shut up, stop fixing things, just get the words from your head onto the paper.
Yeah.
And then later on, when you get the digital copy sent to you by email, then edit that. So that's what I did. So I just streamed of conscious. I just like there was times when people next to me The one I was sitting in a restaurant down south here, and this guy tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but what are you writing? It sounds like you're angry." Because I was like, and sometimes it would be that. Now, and then what I did is I wrote a prompt that said, act as my copy editor. So I can actually tell you the exact thing because it's on the code COPYED. And then it will automatically write COPYED. Please act as my copy editor. Fix spelling and grammar, but leave my writing as is. Right. So, and then colon, and then I pasted in everything from the typewriter. So what happened is I realized when I was rereading some of the content that because I didn't edit anything, it is a little bit, and I was worried about this, is a little bit rambly. And it goes all over the place because whatever came to my mind, I just shoved down. Right. And so when I first looked at it again, and I thought, this is terrible. Like, I don't know what category to put this in the bookshop because it's just literally whatever came to my mind. When I reread it, maybe a month later, once I got it back from the human editor, I thought it's not as shit as I thought because there's value in that. There's value in the fact that there's different things to pick up in different places and different contexts. And I actually thought that there is a fil rouge, a red thread that does carry throughout the book, even though the topics range. So this was the most stream of consciousness that I've ever done in writing a book. It's definitely the most fun I've ever had. If you want to write, I cannot free write, this company that makes those typewriters. I cannot recommend them enough. They made me fall in love with writing again.
Amazing. I'm going to check it out. And everything you reflected on now in your process reminds me of another quote, I believe also that came from Ernest Hemingway, which is to write drunk and then edit sober, right? And it sounds like you did that in a way.
Yes. Yeah, I've never heard that quote before. It sounds peak Hemingway, and it sounds exactly like how it should feel. Like I don't drink, but I totally get what he's saying.
Yeah, totally.
The one thing I'm not, the one thing I wish I was, is I'm not carefree. Like I'm not a carefree person. But I write in a carefree way. It's the one place, more so than on the stage, more so than anything, is I feel quite carefree when I write. And that's that drunk courage kind of thing.
Yeah, the kind of sort of sense of, lowered inhibitions so that whatever needs to come out from the deep, it can. And then later on, you worry about, the sense making and the punctuation and everything. So yeah, it makes sense. I think you were imbued with the spirit of our friend Ernest there, which is awesome.
Well, I'll take that as a compliment. Ernie.
So let's get into some of the kind of the stuff in the book, at least what I picked up, and then I'd love to kind of get your reactions, your thoughts. Maybe we can kind of linger on some of them. But one of the first things you kind of open with are this sort of the values of relevance. The book is called Relentless Relevance, and kind of the key words I've got in front of me now are curiosity, mischief, and optimism. Why are those the three key words? Why are those the values?
Yeah, I went to this quite a bit. Curiosity was it was such an obvious one. It was just a start, so that we have to be curious about things. Mischief. The mischief was a tricky one. So I want people to go to war with certain ideas. I think we need to go on the offense. But I realized that it sounds, I couldn't find the right way to present what I was trying to be, like offensive, like you must go on the attack. And I think there's a sensitivity to that, especially with technologies today, like, graphic designers their careers are being attacked by AIs or things like this. But we need to be playful with the technologies of the future. We need to be playful with ourselves and with our views of ourselves in the past. We need to not take ourselves as seriously as we do. And we need to have a curious, playful, exploratory mindset around the future of the world. And I think that if you combine curiosity with the third one, optimism, the only thing that's kind of left for you is that you have to try stuff. And that's that kind of mischievous, playful nature that I want. Playful was not enough because it sounded too frivolous. Attacking was too in the middle. Mischievous was like a playful offense, like you're making mischief. You're being a disruptor, but you're doing it out of joy, curiosity, and optimism. And I believe that that's how we have to see the future. If we don't have that mindset, those three things, and I tried to measure myself against those throughout the writing process. I didn't have those things there present. One of them was missing, and it didn't seem to work. And I felt my relevance in the situation dropped.
I love the choice specifically of the word mischief as well, because it kind of implies this kind of sort of childlike wonder and sense of play, which maybe sometimes can get a bit naughty, you know, get a little bit kind of stepping on toes and stepping out of the boundaries. And that's just part of, you know, being a kid. And I think as adults, we sort of expect ourselves to not do that anymore. We expect ourselves to put on the suit and kind of color within the lines. And you kind of lose a little bit of sense of that wonder, of that play, of that sense of mischief, which is so integral in going on the offense, as you say. So I just love that. I love that playfulness.
Thank you. And you've hit it on its head. So here's the problem, right? We get told, we're told many times throughout our life, and maybe when we're younger, but we carry it when we're older, is to act our age. But the problem is, I turned 50 last year, but my brain doesn't feel like when I looked at a 50-year-old when I was 20, I imagined 50-year-olds had old man thoughts. I thought they thought like old people, but I am 50 and I don't think I'm broken, but I still think the same way. Like my brain hasn't aged, my body has aged, my hair's gone white, but my brain is still on fire and I'm still trying to do things. And I want to bring back a little bit more of that playfulness. I'm really obsessed with this idea that people are stopping that. They're starting to, I speak to people even younger than me, like from 40 and beyond, and they're almost, some of them are starting to feel like the best is behind them. And I really want to go to war with that idea. And I think that for most of us, the best should be in front of us. We're the smartest, best version of ourselves. And the only way we do that is with those three values and a decision that we want to be relevant for longer. Because my brain is better today than it was 20 years ago. But I did feel myself starting to tap out and feeling my time was over, and I don't want to feel that anymore. So I want to bring back some of that childlike playfulness for myself and for the future.
Which is then where the optimism comes from too. It seems as though you can't have the optimism without the playfulness, and I think sometimes we try and find ways to cheat that or to kind of circumvent that, where we want the good picture, but we need to experiment and kind of test and iterate and see what's out there in order to make that happen. So it makes sense that you know, there's a trinity about those three kind of words that build up the picture of what it means to be relevant in various different ways, which is cool.
Yeah, I mean, so I think pessimism fuels irrelevance, right? Because nothing will stop you from moving like pessimism. There's no pessimist has achieved anything worthwhile in the world. Even people who don't believe, they could be terrified, but they wouldn't have done something if they didn't believe that they could. If you look at throughout history, everyone who's been beaten into compliance. Like I remember seeing a film, and it's maybe a horrible thing to bring up, but I remember seeing there's a plane landing here. I hope my noise canceling is, can you?
No.
So loud. So I remember seeing a film, and it was about people getting a whole bunch of people who marched, Jewish people and gypsies and things like this, by a handful of Germans. And these people were kind of waiting in a line, and then, you know, they would get shot down. This is obviously through World War II. And I remember watching this film thinking, but there's like 200 of them, and there's, you know, 5 people with machine guns. If all 200 stormed, you know, somebody would survive. A lot of people would die, as opposed to everybody dying. But what happened is that there had been such a mind control where people were just browbeaten to believe that there was no hope. And when there's no hope, there is no action that you can worthwhile take. If you believe that there's a small chance that you can do something, you know. So I'm not saying, when I say optimism, I'm not saying, oh, everything's amazing, unicorn shitting rainbows. I'm saying that we have to believe that we can still prevail. And that when you have that, then you need a way to if it feels difficult, it might feel overwhelming, but if you can bring in a level of playfulness and curiosity to that, I think you've got a chance.
Yeah, it's almost Yeah, it's like it's sort of earned optimism in a way, right? You know,
I
rather
love
than
that.
kind of, yeah, the unicorn level, which is, yeah, which isn't useful. And useful is a word that you kind of explore a little bit, and I love that, because one of the things you say in the book is kind of this idea of relevance, kind of meaning the same thing as usefulness. You know, relevance not just in the kind of the social media influencer, pop star, here today, gone tomorrow sense. You know, are you relevant in a news feed? But rather relevant as in, are you doing something that contains value? You know, are you doing something for someone and that matters to them? You know, I love that. Talk to me a little bit about that, the usefulness piece.
So the definition I went for relevance was the state of being appropriate to the matter at hand. So there's two parts to that are important. The first part is, what is the matter at hand? And then the second part is, am I useful to it? So if you cared about X, or public speaking, and the skill that we have is training people to do that, we're appropriate to the matter at hand. But if that's not a skill that you care about, and I'm trying to convince you that you need it, it doesn't matter how good we are at it, we are not appropriate to the matter at hand. So the big concern for me is, I think that there is a relationship between relevance and usefulness, and this is one of the places where I got maybe philosophical about. I was thinking about longevity, and there's longevity, and when we think about longevity, we think about health, and that makes sense. But sometimes we think about health, but we rarely enough think about wealth. So we could maybe be healthy enough to live to be 100, but we have not financially planned for that, and so we become a burden from the age of 85 to everybody who's left behind. That's not ideal. But let's say you even manage to have health and wealth dialed in. If you're not useful, if you don't feel like you have anything left to add to the humans around you, then you're just waiting to die. And this is a real big problem for me, is I think that people run out of their utility value, because they don't think, and part of our job should be, how long, what is the longevity of my usefulness, and how can I change that? Because what made us useful at 40, and maybe even when we're still working at 65, may not be what makes us useful later. And so we have to start planning and thinking about this, about the longevity of our utility, and what do I want it to be? It's why, for me, when you're younger, you're collecting intelligence. When you're older, you're distilling to wisdom. I thought about posting on, people post these 30 things to do when you've learned when you're 30, and 40 lessons for 40. And I thought, 50 lessons for 50.
Yeah.
But that's a terrible idea, because by 50, we should be shortening the list.
Yes.
By 50, we should be distilling and coming down. And I think that's, for example, one of the utilities that I want to have as I become an elder, is that I want to make sure that I have worked out what I can work towards that will make me most useful for the other humans later on. But while I think that's true at the philosophical level, relative to longevity, I think that's true every single day. We should be asking ourselves, how am I useful to the people around me? How am I useful to my family? How am I useful to this? And the answer to that question will dictate your relevance. How am I useful to my clients? If I'm not that useful to my clients, matter at hand, then I'm irrelevant. And so that's something we have to remedy.
There's two things I love about that. Is the kind of the word useful instead of the word value, because I feel that is just such an overused and kind of overinflated and kind of, and in a way, as a result, misunderstood sort of word that we just use and hear so much, especially in sort of business talk, value adding, create value and all that. Whereas usefulness kind of makes it sort of just snaps everything into a relevant kind of container. This is what I can do for you. This is what's useful. This is what I can put from my skill set into something that is going to be useful for you. How about that? So it's a great way to kind of contain that.
Never thought of that frame before, relative to value, but now you've said it, I feel it's absolutely 100% correct. Like, I'm upset that I didn't think of it in the first place, because you're absolutely right. And I think words matter, and words get to semantic stretch where they no longer mean what they become meaningless.
Exactly.
And value added, some of these words, they become so cliched. Even values in terms of business, they become so cliched. Purpose is another one for me. And that we sometimes don't need to rethink the concept. We just need a better word for them.
Totally.
I think in this case, useful is a better word than, like, if I went to a meeting and I said, how could I add value to this discussion? It's almost ignored. But if I said, what could I do that would be most useful for your audience? I think that people would go, okay.
Totally.
And they would have a different relationship with the word because it took them off guard slightly.
Yeah.
So really well observed. Thank you. I'm going to steal that as if it was my own.
Yeah. Send me a Hemming right. I'll help you with that. But yeah, exactly. So sometimes the choice of words really does make, an impression. Just sometimes even just hearing it, like, oh, okay, you said it useful instead of value, and that's what picked it up for me. The second thing I wanted to say was what you said about purpose, and that's obviously another giant kind of planet-sized word that also kind of loses its meaning and sort of just is so big that we can't get our hands around it. But at the same time, a sense of usefulness, I think, plays right into a sense of purpose that you have in your life. But at the same time, I love what you've said, just kind of lifting from one of the little pieces in the book here, where you kind of talk a bit about the fact that sometimes the purpose is not this kind of fixed North Star type of thing, which we are all led to believe it needs to be or should be, but that it changes and that it sort of, moves and it can kind of mutate and become different things based on different sources of information, different things that happen in life. So help me to kind of square that a little bit, where we can think or rethink of purpose, not as this sort of like, I am here to make babies, I am here to, create financial products and that's it, but rather this flexible thing that kind of, infers a journey rather than a destination.
Well, so it's funny because in a business sense, I really push hard for destination and journey together. In a personal level, I guess my problem with purpose is purpose presupposes a reason for being. So this was our initial, if I get Senechian, this was our why. This was the reason we exist. But this becomes a problem because what happens if the reason you exist no longer exists? So if the reason you exist is to get a roll of film into everybody's hands in the world, so, right? Let's pretend Kodak's job was to make sure that they made sure that nobody was ever 10 meters away from a roll of film so that they could always capture the moments. And they felt that that was their underlying purpose. And sure, you might argue that, yes, but maybe they thought it was to take a picture or something like this, and that could have made them move. The problem is if the world shifts, and it becomes a lot harder to shift when the world moves outside of the spotlight of your purpose. Wow. So generally, when we create a purpose statement, my first problem with purpose statements is that most companies retrofit them. So they say, we did start in order to do this. That doesn't make sense. I think a better word is intent. What is our intent? What do we intend to achieve? As a human, if I thought my purpose was, so Missing Link's purpose statement would be to help ordinary people deliver extraordinary presentations. But when we had our staff meetup a few weeks ago, I want to go to war with presentations. We actually don't want to be in that space anymore. And everyone's like, but we're helping ordinary people deliver extraordinary presentations. So, yeah, cool. That was true 2 years ago. It's not true now. It was even true 28 years ago. If we become beholden, if we think something is our purpose, we think it's our reason for being, therefore we're beholden to it. And one of the epigraphs that I open the book with is, no person ever walks through the same river twice because they're not the same. It's not the same river and they're not the same person. And this is kind of the problem I have with a purpose is we almost make this larger than us. But actually, we do not exist in service of a purpose. A purpose exists in service of us. And so we should be able to use them and discard them when they no longer provide utility value. But because the word purpose presupposes this thing is bigger than us, it's a problematic word because it sticks us in to say that, well, we've got to continue doing that. Now, I don't think I've got it perfect yet. I don't think I've managed to get exactly what the better word is. But I do think that we should exist with intent, and we should be intentional about where we're trying to head to in the short term. But I also do push the idea that infinite game thinking, which works well with purpose, is actually not how humans best live. Well, how we live is we play lots of purposeful short games, finite games. Yeah. And if one game no longer serves us, we play a different game and a different game, and allows us to change.
it makes so much sense, and I love what you said. I almost want to kind of print that out. You know, we don't exist in service of a purpose, but a purpose exists, you know, to our benefit, which makes sense. You know, we're kind of finite, but yet at the same time, kind of growing, curious beings, and sometimes you need a few different purposes working together or maybe against each other in order to kind of make sense of a larger picture, which makes sense. There's something about in that about the relentless part of the title of your book as well, which kind of jumps out at me, which I want to jump into as well, because the, you know, what does relentless mean? Once again, going into words, it's kind of unceasing, it's sort of, you know, breathless, it's kind of just moving all the time, it's not stopping at all for anything. And it kind of feels like you, just in the example you gave, revisiting and kind of re-examining the purpose of your own business every 2 years, every year, every 5 years, whatever it might be. There's a sort of a relentless engine at work here, trying to find where that kind of purpose is or how it's mutated. Talk to me a bit about what that word means for you and why it's the first word of the name of the book.
It was going to be ruthless relevance. Like I wanted like that, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it was actually a chat GPT discussion that kind of got me to relentless from there. And let me tell you what I like about it, and how it kind of landed there is it came down to this principle about how often should you ask the question. And so I believe that in the past, so if we agree with my definition that relevance is a state of being appropriate to the matter at hand, what I think has changed in the world is how the cadence of which we have to ask that. So we used to be able to ask that question once every 5 years. That's why businesses came up with 5-year strategies and things like this. And you know, what is the matter at hand, or what do we think the matter at hand will be then, and when do we work towards that? I think that's changed, and I think that the challenge going forward is actually asking the question a lot, but knowing when not to move. Because what I'm not suggesting, and I try to go into this in the book around the difference between novelty and utility, is I'm not suggesting chop change, chop change, chop change, chop change. I'm suggesting actually being maybe more patient in aspects, separating what are trends and what are your high utility items, and how do we know the difference between those? You know, how can we see that? But the most important thing is that we have to ask ourselves more often than not is, what is the matter at hand and how am I appropriate to it? Those two questions. Once a month with your leadership team or with your team and your huddle, say, hey, in our industry, what is the matter at hand and how are we appropriate to it? And, you know, almost every industry is being so rapidly disrupted. There is new technologies in the presentation space being invented every month. In our AI company, Too Many Robots, there's literally 500 applications being launched a day in this space. And so for us to sit down and say, okay, well, what is the matter at hand now? Is agentic still the right conversation to be having? I actually believe agentic will be a small little blip in the AI journey that will be important in order to get us somewhere, but will not actually be where we head to. It is a gate, not a destination. And so we need to be thinking further. And in fact, I did a video this week on that, is that I think that 5 years is exactly the wrong time frame to be thinking at. It's too far to be relevant to us and too near to be interesting. We need to be thinking a year or 2 years in terms of planning, tactical and predictive. And then we need to be thinking 10 years, 20 years in terms of prognostic thinking.
I can't remember where I've heard a similar type of refrain before, but we're really bad at middle term planning, you know, where there's that sort of that 3 to 5 to 7 year kind of area where it's just really difficult to get any clarity, especially for an organization. You just, like you said, it's too far to kind of really know exactly what's going on, but also too short to sort of, you know, make big investments or big changes. And so, but you know, it doesn't stop a lot of businesses from still trying to do that. But I love this idea of kind of having the tactical and then having the much longer arc in view as well.
You're probably not at the part in the book, but I present the numbers on strategy are staggeringly bad. Like there is no no other technology in business would we allow this failure rate and still accept it. Nowhere close. Like the strategy unequivocally fails. It's a terrible. It's not actually. It's a wonderful technology that existed for a different time, a time in which the world was predictable. And there were two forces that happened. We had a relatively good idea what the world would look like 5 years from now, so we could plan for it. And we had a command and control leadership style that allowed us to tell people exactly what to do. So I could turn around and say, this is what we need you to do for the next X amount of years, and that will get us here. And everyone just went and did their work. We don't have that workforce anymore, and prediction is dead. There is not a boardroom that we facilitate in which I can ask somebody, are you willing to make a reasonable guess that I can hold you accountable to for what the world and your industry will look like in 5 years? And they say no. And I said, well, what about if we plan for a year or even 2 years? So, well, it's difficult, but we can make some good guesses. And I think that's true. But before we do that, so we should do that. But then what we should do is to think, okay, let's plan for not the future, let's plan for futures. Because, NVIDIA's stock was going one way, and then DeepSeek came into play, and then everything changed. And then NVIDIA had to change their offering, and now they've just done a better version of DeepSeek than DeepSeek. And so, other humans get a vote on your future. So we should be sitting there thinking, what 10 scenarios could our industry look like in 10 years? And then what are the most common elements across those industries? Why do we think those are common elements? And how can we start iterating towards those, allowing ourselves to course correct as we see fit, as things chop and change, and not holding ourselves accountable to, because we're not making a prediction, we're being prognostic. We're making a kind of visionary look at things, so we don't get held responsible if it comes true. And
right, exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah. Something else that you talk about a little bit in the book, and I know that you have a massive personal interest in, is games, playing kind of big, giant, infinite games, playing kind of controlled, experimental sort of games. Talk a little bit about the relevance there of kind of almost having this game-like mindset when it comes to maybe just staying on the topic of teams and organizations and leaders who are trying to kind of, tune their TV set to sort of the best version of the future. Like you said, there's futures. And a lot of the time we can help to provide clarity there by playing different types of games. So I just love the connection. Maybe you can spell it out for us.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm taking a shit all over Simon Sinek here. And I am, but it's only under professional jealousy. Okay. It's not that I don't think he's brilliant. It's that
it's okay. One day I'll have him on and then you can answer for your sins. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Perfect. Do it. But I think he's incorrect about infinite games. So I read James Quars's book, Finite versus Infinite Games, or Infinite versus Finite Games, or whatever. Yes. Hardest book I've ever read in my life. Like, geez, my brain was bleeding. I think there are elements of that book that I agree with that are interesting and important, and it's probably worthwhile at least reading the précis of that book. Sinek took that and applied that to business, and he said that his argument, and if you watch even the beginning of his talks on this or clips on this, his talks are basically, you can't win business. Okay, business exists whether you're in business or not. The counter argument is that this is ridiculous. So then the only objective is that the business exists after you leave. Nobody gets excited about that. We don't just live. If the job of life is just to stay alive until you die, that is the infinite game, right? Because the world doesn't exist before or after me, for my brain, right? It came into, it started existing when I was born and it stops existing when I was died. In the movie of my life, that's how it happens.
Yeah.
So just seeing your life as an infinite game, while interesting and probably true, is uninteresting. That's why people do an Ironman or get a job or try get a promotion or try win a big client or try do these things, is because we want to play finite games, because all achievement and dopamine and fulfillment happens in the short term. And so actually, while he's not incorrect that business is an infinite game and we should try stay in the infinite game, the actual vehicle to stay in infinite games and to keep humans engaged is just to play a series of interesting finite games. Guys, we've got to be here. We want to internationalize our business. We want to have 20% international clients by the end of this year. Everybody else go and figure out how you can help us do that. Now what you have is you've unleashed people with a victory condition. Every
Mm.
self-determined human in your business is able to play, and the only thing they have to answer towards is, will this get us closer to X? And if the answer to that is no, then that's the wrong game. If the answer is yes, then they can keep playing.
Mm.
And so I think that we need to introduce more finite games into our businesses because, again, the board of directors of a business is responsible for the continuation of their company, but everybody else is involved in the continuation of their career. And what you have to do is find the intersection point between the infinite game of one person's career, or the finite game of one person's career, and the infinite game of the business, and then create these small little game states that will help advance both of those simultaneously. I feel very, very strongly that thinking about your business as an infinite game is a disservice to the people that are playing it.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, it also kind of takes the clarity out of what's required in order to win at the game as well. Like you said, if you can fix everyone on the same victory condition on X, we need 20 clients end of the year, we need to hit, 5 million in revenue by next month, whatever it might be, it's a lot easier to kind of really then look at all of the rules, look at the pieces in the board, kind of combine all the resources and go, great, that's where we're all going to, rather than this idea of it kind of being this sort of constant process, with less defined endpoints, because we're human beings, right? We like kind of straightforward instructions. We like things to be as clear as possible. Whether they're imposed on us or whether we make that clarity is a different kind of discussion, but still.
Well, we just want to know what we're doing as well, right? So we want clear instructions, right. But actually, in absence, if I gave you just instructions and no victory condition, it would be a very, very frustrating journey.
What's the point? Yeah.
We don't hire those kind of humans anymore.
Yeah.
There are some, but they're working in factories and they're hating their life. If I gave you just a victory condition and no instructions, well, for a self-determined human, that's really exciting. And now I'm not saying chaos, I'm saying freedom in a framework. Like, we create a framework of boundaries and rules, and within these parameters, we want you to go and achieve X. And you have to help the organization achieve X by 12 months. How can you do that? And then everybody presents the version of the game that they have to play. And you mean, I guess the sweet spot is for a lot of people is a degree of both. This is where we need you to be, and here are the steps we think you need to take, but fill in the gaps in between, and help us get there. And people can argue and debate the steps, but what they really need to know is the agreed upon strategic destination, that victory condition. The condition under which we can celebrate.
Right. Yeah, exactly. The condition under which other conditions change, or something meaningful happens, right? Yeah.
And listen, we've often created these victory conditions in our business, and then 6 months into the year, I've just been like, yeah, we called it wrong. That was true when we started. It's not true now. And then we change it.
There's something kind of implicit in what you're saying where, and certainly, another name for games can be experiments and can be tests, and I think that this, you can call it growth mindset, you can call it learning mindset, whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter what the word is, but the kind of the focus on, not tying yourself to an outcome, it has to be like that, but rather committing to a process and then running an experiment, seeing what the data gives you, and then being able to kind of iterate which is very much sort of tied into your anti-strategy argument. I think, it's about kind of like, all right, Mike Tyson's just given you a right hook. Now what do you do in the field? Right.
We've gone back right. So we must be strategic. I'm not saying we shouldn't be strategic. I'm saying the model of strategy is dated. But basically we have to have strategic destinations that we can tactically keep on sidestepping towards. So Mike Tyson punches me here, so I've got to go there, but I'm still trying to get towards this. And yeah.
So kind of, if we were looking at, giving this book to let's say a leader of culture, or a leader of learning inside an organization in South Africa, wherever, what are the other kind of key sort of takeaways or learnings or sort of experiments even that you would like them to kind of run with based on what the book goes through? You know, if they didn't have time to kind of read the book, what are some things or what are some ideas that, you know, you feel would be a crime not to put into practice or to test out over the next few months?
I'm not sure the book is written for them.
I know, I'm just saying as a section of the audience. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely, I would want them to embrace and experiment with themselves is the data on all of Ryan and Desi's studies on self-determination theory. I think self-determination theory is so it's the differences self-determined humans have are so profound. It's so powerful that to not be thinking about how we unleash this advantage in our businesses is a crime to business. And why it's so powerful is that it is one of the very, very few forces in the world today that is absolutely better for both parties. It is an absolute win-win. It is better for the business and better for the humans who operate inside the business. And if I was, and in order for self-determination to work, you have to have better guardrails. You have to allow for freedom in a framework. So you have to know what the frameworks are, and you have to know what the destinations are, yes. And then you have to build an organization of coaches over managers. So if you imagine that the people in your organization are the players, the game is won by fulfilling certain, and it can be a trickle of victory conditions, right? So the CEO wants this, the different heads of the different C-suites all reckon, okay, well, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And inside their businesses, you might have 5 or 6 different victory conditions that filter down, but everyone is determined to that. Then what you require is a coaching mindset, a mindset where we really probably need to do away with the traditional model of management or there will be certain levels for it. Although I do argue that I believe that if there's one function of a business that would be better played by an AI, it would be a manager. So not the leadership component, not the human to human component of helping you understand things, but all your reports should be submitted. Did you, but you did not make your 20 sales calls this week. This is not I know you made 8 of them. You were spent only 2 minutes on one of them. Like, what's going on? Like, that seems to me to be a very, very easy. You only have 3 follow-up meetings done. If sales management feels like a perfect use case, for example, for an AI or LLM to work on. So then the role of the human would be as a coach and trying to help you. Okay, so according to your manager, we didn't make enough things. How do we coach you to that? So that would be certainly one thing. And then
sorry.
Another principle I introduced is this idea of infrastructure inversion, which is this concept that instead of seeing, we usually exist with ceilings and they kind of lock us in. And what we need to understand is that any new technology, it's actually, all it's doing is it's building above and it's creating a new floor in which we can stand and we can achieve new things. And if I was in a business, I would ask, what am I able to do today with the tools that we have that can make this a better place to work? What do we now know? What is the current matter at hand? And what are the tools that we can utilize to be more appropriate to the matter at hand? And I think this is where businesses are failing.
I love what you said around the kind of the idea that there's a sort of a mutation of leadership that we can kind of really embrace or grow into, which is more along the lines of a coaching mindset or sort of a mentor, where there's a mentorship or a sort of a sense of sponsorship internally rather than just a sort of a
sponsorship.
Yeah. Not my idea. I've heard that. I probably ripped that from someone that's close to me. I can't remember exactly.
Great frame though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's a sort of a developmental element to it, Yeah.
You're sponsoring these people. You're invested in them.
That's it.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Ponder on that.
Before I open up the floor to anyone who might have some questions or some comments, something you'd like to share with us, feel free to raise your hand and I'll come to you shortly. But something else I wanted to ask you, were there any ideas or concepts, whether you're still working on them or maybe you thought, this would just be too explosive to put into the book? Were there things that were on the cutting room floor, the Hemingway floor, that you didn't end up including in here, and why?
Yeah. So the stuff that I cut, one what happened was originally when I started writing this book, it was going to be, so during COVID, I reread Legicide. And I thought, this was 5 years old at the time. And I thought some of the language I used was dated. And it was quite funny because the book was proof of its own existence, that even some of the concepts I felt in Legicide, which was that legacy thinking kills innovation and progress, I thought some of the ideas were dated and needed to change it. So I started working on some of those concepts, and for a period of time, I wrote a couple of like introductory essays for what would become Legicide 2.0. Mm. When I started working on Relentless Relevance, so a little known fact is that the book was released a year, 10 years to the day. It was officially, I sold one copy to a friend in Belgium who I'll be seeing on Monday, one copy of the book on the 15th of October. So the Legicide came out the day before my 40th birthday, and this one was released the day before my 50th.
Awesome.
And yeah, so on the 15th of October, I sold that copy. And when I was writing the book, I thought to take all of those elements, and there was a bunch of sections that when I looked at them, it's when I realized that it wasn't the sequel to Legicide. It wasn't a 2.0. It was a successor, a spiritual successor that had different ideas.
Yes.
And so a bunch of ideas didn't make what I thought they would. I can check Novler and tell you some of them. But yeah, there was about 6 or 7 concepts that I just thought this was right for that, but it's not right for this. It wasn't because they were particularly dated maybe per se. It was more just because they just didn't fit. And also maybe some of the ideas that I'd moved on from. I was like, yeah, I don't feel strongly enough about this anymore.
But that's kind of, in a way, practicing what you're preaching, certainly in this book, which is that, the purpose changes, and sometimes the equipment and the material needs to change too, because who can predict the future? You can't. And so we can invest in different ways of thinking about different futures, like you said earlier, and some of them work out. In fact, most of them don't work out. And, we kind of test different things out. And so I think it would be strange if you looked back and you reread the book and you were kind of bang on about everything. That would feel weird, wouldn't it?
Well, I've done a terrible job there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I'm trying to hypothesize things. I'm trying to think further. My problem with most futurists, and there are some who get it better. I've got friends who are good. And my problem with most futurists is what they actually do is they make very safe bets on present tense technology that has been unevenly distributed.
Right.
So what they're talking about is they're not talking about the future. They're talking about their audience's future. What could be in your future based on what currently already exists. And I don't waste much. I talk about AI a bit, but I don't go deep. When you get to that section, you'll see that I'm trying to think beyond to where this goes and to think further. And I make some cases that I believe that I believe that this will be what the world will look like. I think we're thinking about general intelligence the wrong way, that we should be thinking about connected intelligence as opposed to general intelligence. Basically, I don't need one thing that does everything. I need 50 things that can speak to each other. And that's what we need better. And then more is I need it to speak to us. So I need to be part of the loop. These things communicate in megabits per second, and we communicate at 38 bits per second. That's a fuck up, right? So we've got to narrow that gap. How do we do that? And so I try to think about that quite a bit in the future. But I'll certainly be wrong about many things. And, it just takes one little innovator because of one technology that I don't know, that doesn't exist yet today, causes one ripple, and then the world goes a different way. But I wanted to have brave ideas and brave thoughts. And in order to have brave ideas and brave thoughts about the future and to make brave statements, you need to be willing to be incorrect.
Yeah.
So I certainly was willing to be incorrect in this.
And I think it's okay to embrace not just being incorrect, but probably being okay with being incorrect most of the time. Because that's how it works out. That's what happens. Whether it's predicting if it's going to rain tomorrow, or if it's, deciding, well, am I going to go on holiday here next month, or am I going to, embark on a big career move next year? I get there and actually, I turned out I wanted something else, or there were totally other factors at play that ended up changing that, and that's okay, because that's progress. That's not being incorrect. That's just how things are.
So here's a cutting room floor idea that's basically that. So it was generation theory. So I've been quite vocally anti this. I still argue its utility value. And in fact, I think it's generally a force for bad. It's generalization on any level. We've seen the negative side of generalization on so many levels of the world today. The fact that we think it's okay to say fucking boomers or millennials, or because it's almost never wielded as a compliment.
Yes.
Right? So when somebody turns around and says this person is Gen X or Gen Y, unless we're talking about ourselves, I'm a Gen Xer. It's never a compliment. It's always an insult to everybody else. And I also think that it's not nearly as interesting as we think it is, in that we all change when time changes.
Right.
However, I recognize, and again, also the cadence of generations is changing. So it used to be, we had almost a generation. A generation's like 20 odd years. Now we're every 5 years, we're having to come up with new ones because the world is changing too quickly. So I wanted to go deep on this and the idea of the relevance of that. First of all, I didn't understand why I was telling the people I was telling, other than just as a lecture. And second of all, I think I might be slightly wrong in what I was saying, in that I've always felt that frame was incorrect and too narrow, but maybe not. Maybe there is some functional value in being able to look at a group of people and recognize that a group might think in a different way. Where I think it's become a problem is I think that we spend too much time pandering to younger generations, like what would this generation need from us? Whereas every other generation that became before, the job of the young generation was to figure out what the old generation wanted from them and then go the other way. And I actually do think that's got a higher value to society at large. We shouldn't let people with non-fully formed brains be dictating the way that the world engages.
Absolutely.
And so, but anyway, so that was one idea where I realized that my idea was no longer fully formed enough to have value. And I'm looking at, and the last little piece I wrote in there was, is this still relevant? I see that I never answered the question, and it's not in the book in the way that it was going to be. So
it's cool to see that you kind of took that editorial stance where you were forcing yourself to be relentlessly relevant in the content itself, staying true to what you wanted to express, even though the book itself expresses a variety of ideas, but it's still kind of, it's not just an idea, but it's also a temperament in a way. To be relevant in a relentless kind of way. There's a sort of a color to that, which is cool.
Alex, this is not about my book, this is about books. People need to write books quicker in today's day and age. It used to be you could sit and you could ruminate over a book. If you're going to write a work of fiction, I've got a work of fiction I want to write called Race Erasure. And it's a speculative fiction thing. And then I can spend some time. It's a cool concept, I think. But anyway, dystopian world. Anyway, on the flip side, though, I just finished Yuval Noah Harari's new book.
Which one? Oh, the new one. Okay, yeah.
The new one. Fuck, what's it called again? Not Homide.
Not Homide. No, I know there's a new one.
Whatever. Yeah, it was shit. And I loved his previous books. And maybe I wouldn't say it was shit. It was shit for me.
Sapiens is still the best. Yeah.
Nexus. Thank you, Bernard. Thank you. Yes, Nexus. Okay, so I read Homo Deus first and went back to Sapiens. Yeah. Then I read Sapiens, and then I read the full graphic novel series of Sapiens, which I loved. Then I skipped the next one, and then I read Nexus. My problem with Nexus is that he took so long to write the book that by the time the book was gone through the writing process, gone through the editing process, gone through this, a lot of the book felt dated.
Yeah, it's just
if you're going to write a book like that, long books don't work anymore in that sense. He's used to writing long books, but it takes so long to write a book like that a lot of what you've written is no longer true at the point that you publish it, or even the point that you write it. And I was frustrated because I would have gone into that the day before it was published. I would have a living, if I was going to write a long book like that, it would be a living book. That this is the book that was true the day I published it. And you can use this promo code to log on to a website. And I'm going to change everything at all.
That's a cool idea.
When we created Legacyte originally, I tried to pitch my publisher. It was originally called Sell by Date. And the idea was that every page number was sell by date /135. So sellbydate.com/135. And every single page existed as a blog post. And
Yes.
I wrote edits to every single blog post after the fact, and you could comment in and share
Like a
things.
Wikipedia page. Yeah.
Yeah, and we wanted to call it Blooker, this service. And the idea was that all books
cool.
existed as a series of blog posts, and you could sequentially go through and update it. So the idea was that, and this was like in 2007, the idea was that the book was only true. That's when I got the original book publishing contract. The book was only true at the point that it was written, and therefore we need a better mechanism for updating it.
Imagine you could apply that to sort of massive books like the Bible or A Brief History of Time or, stuff like that. Then, wow, imagine how long those citations are.
I would imagine people have tried to do that with the Bible, right? It's probably the most explored book in the world, and that people do comment on it and date it and change it and do things like that, which is interesting. Yeah.
Amazing, man. It's awesome to talk to you and to get inside your head for that. By the way, how long did it take you to write this book? If we're talking about how long it takes.
I think so. So my deadline was, I'll tell you exactly. I can tell you exactly when I started it, because it was the day after I got the keyboard. My deadline was the 1st or 2nd of October, I think it was. My daughter's birthday, the 2nd of October. And I started writing on, give me 1 second. It was about 6 weeks or so. It was much longer than Here Be Dragons. Here Be Dragons was much quicker. That was,
it took you 6 weeks.
Yeah, Here Be Dragons was 16 days.
16 days.
Yeah, from start to finish. From the publisher saying to me, "You've got a book contract." I had I actually had a 14-day deadline. But then it took me, I asked her to give me the extra weekend. Oh, wait.
The extra weekend. Wow, that's fast.
Yeah, I can't say exactly when it was, but it was like it was late August or something, mid to late August that I started, and I finished on the.
That's fast. Wow.
You know what? It was funny though, because both those books, like in Here Be Dragons, which was the fastest one. I mean, when I got the publishing deal, I still had like gigs to go and do and work and business to run. It wasn't like I was sitting writing. The key is that I'd been idea trapping for a long time before.
Yes.
And so I'd had a whole bunch of thoughts sitting in Rome as concepts. And so I'd been looking for a while. So I curate the book.
Yes.
For a long time, and then I create the book quite quickly.
Almost
but
like
again,
clippings.
I think that you owe it to your readers to write, edit, and publish a book quickly. And it's also, the other thing is that I write short books. I think fiction books, the value in a fiction book is in the reading of it. The value of a nonfiction book is in applying it. The burden of brevity should always fall on the author, not the reader. So we should be trying to write small books, short books that people can consume quickly and add on and act on. Yeah.
Beautiful. Wow, beautiful. You've given us so much to think about and so much to celebrate. Having a relentlessly relevant and wise person like you come and chat with us again. Thanks again for making the time, Rich. Really appreciate it. It's always nice to have a conversation with you.
It's 100% my pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to come and chat to you. And I just love what you're doing. And it's always, I'd be stoked if it was just the two of us and we were just chatting. And I've taken away so much to think about from this, from you. So I always value our chats and conversations. So thanks.
Me too, man. Don't be a stranger. Let's do it more often. Yeah.
Absolutely.